Hey Space Sleuths and Alien Detectives, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV, and today we're going to do a part 3 of the series that I've done recently, which you'll see on my channel. Row of Statues on Mars, part 2 and part 1. This is going to be part 3 to that because I found so many more in this area as the rover drove along past these here, then past these, and came to this area we're at now, which is this area, Sol 571 now. Some of the things I found in this area did appear in the previous video, but I've been looking at all the images from 571, and there's quite a few of them. Most of these close-up images don't really show much. They just kind of show the rover and the ground and a few pebbles and things. And they're not much cop really, but if you look at these up here, of the ridge lines, and what looks like a road going along it. Now this happens to be the same kind of valley or road type structure. It may not be a road, but what I mean is there's a kind of ridge at the back and some flat ground in front. Now this may have been part of a river or canal or road or something flat. Couldn't tell you which because it's all kind of filled in with sand. I can't really tell, but this is on the same kind of road or straight structure, I should say, that leads all the way to the temple, what I've called the temple, where this video shows a bunch of statues and things here. I called it the Mars Temple. I did a video initially about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago now, called the Mars Temple and Statues, I think it was called. I'll put a link to that at the end of this video as well, and a link to these, which I'll put in a playlist. I'll make a new playlist with these videos in, so that you can just click on the one link at the end, okay? So, but I do advise that you watch part 1 and 2 first, really, because then this will make more sense to you. But I'll try and keep it fairly logical if I can, but there's a lot of things to show here, and I've been going through every image almost and finding a statue or something similar in almost every image. It's actually quite unbelievable, and I was going to put this video up yesterday, but I kept finding more and more statues like these. The one by the temple initially that started all this was this one here, which also appears on Mars Magazine, okay? Now this is probably the best statue I found early on anyway, back in 2013 I think I found this, about 5 years ago. And I've made a whole bunch of videos about this and the surrounding area, but this is kind of an update on that. And knowing what I know now, I've done a bit more in-depth analysis of these images, and I've been a bit more careful and cross-referenced them with other sols and other images as well to see if what I'm actually seeing is real or some kind of an optical illusion. And for the most part, I think what we're dealing with here is a whole bunch of skulls and statues that are lying on these ridge lines. A very good example here. I did a video about this one years ago also. There's a skull just here. The video is called Mars Alien Animal Skull, Curiosity Rover Bone. Now this is going back 4 years, just over 4 years. About 4 years actually. So I'll put that in the playlist as well or something at the end, because we don't have time to go through all this stuff. But this looks like some kind of goat or kind of antelope skull or some kind of goat, or I don't know what it is exactly, but it's got an eye here and a jaw here, but unfortunately we've got this rock in front, so you can check that out if you want to. I mean, there are so many of these things in the area. There's also this video which I did, Mars Tiny Alien Statue or Fungi. Now this was also 2014, but this was April, so even further back. But this was initially posted, I think, by Will from What's Up in the Sky, and I did a version of it as well. I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And it kind of looks a little bit like a little statue. I'm just going to play that through a little bit. This is really quick video, this, less than a minute long, I think. Just here. Okay, now this was in an image taken a few days earlier, I think, a couple of days earlier, on Sol 669, I think. So it's from a little bit further back, but it does look like a little figure here. But I've been looking at this a bit more closely, and it's not what we think it is. It kind of looks like a little figurine type thing with a head and an arm sticking out and another arm there, but it isn't. it just kind of looks a bit like that from this distance. This is an optical illusion. You have a shadow here. This, what looks like an arm sticking out here, is actually a shadow coming from an object behind this. Okay, and this isn't an arm at all sticking up here. This actually, when you look at it properly, resembles a small sphinx or kind of figurine on a kind of little plinth here. Okay, I'll let you watch that in your own time. Let's get on with it because this is going to take a bit of time. Well, I'll try and be succinct and quick here if I can, but there is an awful lot of stuff to show. Here's that figure that I just showed you. Now, this is obviously taken a bit closer up. I've done some really basic enhancements there, just on the shadow and colour. In fact, it helps if you go back a bit. There we are. It doesn't resemble that thing I just showed you at all because this is a slightly different angle, and we're seeing that the base of this structure, which is kind of triangular, and this is not an arm sticking out at all. There's a shadow from here and another shadow from here. Now, whether that's coming off of this object, that shadow, or there's something behind it over here, I can't really tell. But it's a bit of an optical illusion. But when you look at it more carefully, this thing kind of looks like a head with a face, 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth here, and a chin, and a kind of body here, which is kind of stuck in the sand, which may go down much further and be joined to something else. Who knows? A lot of these things are. So that was weird. So I'll put a clip in. I don't really know what to think of that because there's not quite enough detail in it to actually decide one way or the other because it's really quite small. So we're not seeing a great deal of detail there, but there are some interesting details in here, which kind of looks like a face and sort of hair going on here, but it may be nothing to do with that. It may actually be fungi. There are examples of fungi in the area, at least what looks like fungi, so it could be. So that was interesting. That just goes to show you how the light angles can really change an object depending on how close you are and what angle you're at, and that kind of thing. So let's move on. There's a lot to show here. I'm going to go to the big one, the one that you've probably seen on the cover, which is this. Let me find the meme of it first because the meme looks better and kind of it shows all of it. Hang on, it's that one we want. There we are. Now, I posted this on Mars Magazine a day or two ago, a couple of days ago, and a few other pages, and people have gone pretty crazy about it. And I can see why. I mean, I was flabbergasted when I found this. It's just insane. Absolutely insane. And what's even more interesting, other than the obvious alien-looking skull, not skull, but I would say some kind of statue head that's kind of leaning against this kind of ridgeline here. There's one right next to it as well. If you look closely, here's the enhanced clip there. Got this one here. And there's another one right next to it, but it's all kind of broken, and the head is broken here. It's split. And in fact, that may be part of it here that's split and then kind of rolled down and ended up down here. Who knows? But either way, even if you disregard that, this is really quite unbelievable. It looks like a grey alien. I mean, what else can I say? I mean, I'll put that on the title here. I haven't found many of these on Mars. Most of the statues and heads that I found look kind of humanoid, kind of human, really. Some are the kind of proto-human. Some kind of look a bit simian and monkey-like, a bit like Hanneman in part 1. But this is a completely different type of alien altogether, and falls into that category of big bug-eyed aliens that we see in our films and in science fiction, comics and that kind of thing. You know, the big sort of elongated head and the big sort of almond eyes, little tiny nose. This has got quite a sort of long sort of maxilla here with teeth, long teeth, which you wouldn't really expect. I mean, the archetypal aliens that we see, grey aliens, have a very small mouth. They don't have this big kind of mouth here. So this is really quite odd. Obviously, if this is a carving, it could be quite exaggerated. Often with art, you know, for one reason or another, if it is art, is often exaggerated for certain reasons, propaganda maybe. you know, if it was an actual statue here. So that was absolutely insane. I mean, that is, I don't know, I'm a bit kind of speechless about that, really. Let me show you a close-up of that. Actually, better from here. You want number 3, that's it. Right, there we are. It's pretty clear. I mean, it doesn't actually get that clear when you get too close. Pretty clear, though. This looks very similar in shape, with a kind of chin-like structure here going up. And this may have had quite a large head sticking up as well, which, like I said, is kind of split and come off. But this one is almost perfectly intact by the looks of it, and it's just kind of tucked between these rocks either side. And because it's kind of leaning up against this ridgeline, may well have been very well protected from any blast or severe kind of erosion, depending on the wind direction, of course. So a lot of these things we see that are out in the open are quite heavily eroded and broken and damaged, the ones that are more out in the open. But the ones that are kind of leaning back, like this one, and some of the others are, they're kind of leaning right back against something. They seem to be in a lot better condition. Another thing here, this is the same area. Not, in fact, only yards away from that one I just showed you, along the same ridge. This is near the back of the ridge as well, so it's in pretty good condition, but a lot smaller or further away, a bit of both. And it's not particularly clear, but you can see some kind of weird thing here that's like an animal skull or something, which may just be a rock. But this thing not only has hair, but has an eye and a nose and some bright kind of teeth showing, like some I showed in the previous video, part 2. And in part 1, there's 1 or 2 examples there I showed of heads with very bright white-looking teeth. So that was interesting. Not a hell of a lot of detail to be seen here when you zoom in. It's eroded and further back, so we're not right up close to it, unfortunately. But there's enough there to be interesting. There was also this one, and then if you look a little bit closer here, you've got a mouth with teeth here. You've got a nose going up here with some nostrils and 2 eyes. Now, unfortunately, this is broken. This would have probably come up to here and curved round, and this is split away. This, I thought initially was just a rock, but when it was right next to that, I thought, well, you've got to kind of think twice about a lot of these things, and a lot of them probably are just rocks, but this also has facial features like a mouth here, a nose here, an eye, brow ridges here, just about another eye there. Don't really know about that. This one's pretty vague because unfortunately it's heavily damaged, but this is more out in the open. This is more exposed. It's not right up against the back of a ridge, and it isn't protected from erosion and such things as much. So this is a typically damaged looking possible statue, or 2 here. So I will put clips again of all these in at the end. I'm trying to go through all these and not spend too long explaining them because there's too much to see here, and I'm trying to get all this in. There was this one. Now, did I actually do a meme of that? I think I probably did. There we are. Yeah, there's the meme. Right, okay. Now, this is weird. Now, not particularly clear, this one either, but this is a standalone object, which has, even in the raw image, you can see this square emblem on the forehead. And I call that a forehead because this looks a bit like a skull, a human or animal, I don't really know. Kind of an ear, kind of an eye there, kind of an eye there, and some teeth-looking things here, which may or may not be a skull, I don't know. It seems too irregular or damaged to actually work out what you're looking at, really. But it's interesting, mainly because of this actual emblem here. I think that's the most perfect little square thing I've seen on any of these kind of rocks or whatever they're supposed to be. But it reminded me a bit of the mobile phone that I published, the Mars mobile phone, where it's got a really square kind of rectangular screen-looking thing on it, you know. And this reminded me of that because this is perfectly square, and it's not a compression artifact because this, in fact, this object appears in a number of images, and that squares in all of them. So it's definitely there. It's not a compression artifact. In fact, what I do is I always use the BR2 versions of the image, of the raw images, which are only about 5% compressed, unlike the so-called full res ones, that most people look at, which are 25, at least to 25% compressed. They've got compression lines all over them. And often they show as square blocky kind of structures in the image, but these don't. Because basically, the BR2s are actually really good. They're clear, they're almost uncompressed. They're only very, very slightly compressed, and you don't lose a lot of data. So they're pretty smooth when you zoom in. There's not that much distortion. There's that skull thing that I did years ago there. You can see it pretty clearly. There's the eye, there's the lower jaw there, you can see the nostril here. You can check that out later if you wish. There's loads of stuff in here, and I haven't even gone all through the whole lot properly yet. I've still got a bit of work to do. So that was interesting, that one. I don't really know what to call that, whether it's a skull or not, I don't really know. But that square thing, to me, the rest of it's a bit too vague, but that square thing really stood out because it's got a lighter part inside, almost like a label or something, or some sort of really nicely carved emblem. Very interesting. Don't know about that really. Don't really know what to say about that. Don't know what it is. Don't know what that represents, but it's interesting. So there's lots of things in this area. I've showed you most of them now. Oh, there was this one as well. This is weird. This is another head. Very strange looking. A bit fuzzy, a bit smaller. Not much detail, but you could see a row of teeth here, a nose, an eye there. It's a bit vague. It's in shadow, so it's a bit hard to make out what's going on here. But when you darken it, that's what happens. The eye kind of pops out a bit more, and you can see more shadow around the nose. There we are. So there was that one. I'll put a clip of that in at the end as well. There was this one, which was quite large. Now, in the raw image, I thought, oh, it's probably just another rock, like you normally do. But bearing in mind that all the other statues, which are only yards away from this, I thought, well, let's have a closer look. And if you look carefully, you can see an eye here, a nose here, and a mouth with some teeth here. It's got a very flat top to it. This is a carving that is eroded and broken out. This is also stood out on its own a bit, so it's heavily eroded. It's not protected by loads of other rocks and a ridge line like the others. It's further out. So there's more erosion here, and here's the enhancement. Colour corrected it and darkened it and brightened it. There's the eye, which is kind of triangular, a bit like the one in part 1, which looks kind of triangular as well, which is odd. You've got the nose, very flat nose, which is, this all looks heavily eroded and broken away, some of it. Very flat nose there. A mouth here with what looks like some teeth structures here, which are all kind of a bit broken. And a mouth there. This kind of looks almost Olmec, like some of the big Olmec heads you see in Mexico. I have found similar ones to this in the area. Not this particular area, but near. Less than a mile away. So, it's not untypical. It's not obvious straight away because this is really kind of worn down here. It's pretty flat and worn away, but it's there, and it's not unlike some that I've published before. So there's loads here. Is there any more? There was that one I've already showed you. There's that one. So I think I'll call it a day here. Basically, if I find any more things in this area, which I'm sure I will before I finish today, I'll put them in at the end to compare. The other video, these are literally from the same image set here. So you've got this from the last video, you've got this monkey kind of head, gorilla or monkey or kind of baboon, don't really know what type of primate that is. There's this one here, this statue that was Martine, I think, found about 3 years ago. 2 eyes, a nose, and mouth. They're all in the same area, so this is all related, all this stuff. And there's loads of other stuff in this area. So do go back and watch part 1 and part 2 if you haven't already, and I'll put them in a little playlist and put a link to that and any other relevant stuff that I think may be related, like the original temple video. I'll see if I can dig up that one about the temple, which I did about 3 or 4 years ago, and the temple and the statues. Because basically the rover drove along this kind of area. You've got this kind of flat area. Now, this, if you walked along here and kept walking over to the right here, it kind of meanders round a bit. It's also almost in a straight line, slight curve to it, and you will end up at the temple, where part 1 was based, and then part 2 I did an update on that. So the rover kind of just drove along this area, and it ended up where we are now. And there's statues all along this ridgeline, okay? And this is a perfect example. This is from part 2. It would have drove along here, just in front of all this. There's the ridgeline at the back. There's one, that statue there. There's the ape there. There's a whole bunch of stuff up here and further along. So you can actually see all this as it kind of pans out. Let me show you the Gigapan of that, which I did. It's driven in front of this ridgeline, and this ridgeline goes all the way along here. You can see it, okay? Now there's a whole load of stuff up here on this ridge, but unfortunately it's pretty vague, and it's too far back. There seems to be something here that's a bit like a statue here, kind of teardrop shaped, but it may just be a rock. That one, can't really tell, too far away. But most of these things are in front of this ridgeline and are quite heavily eroded, like this here, this stuff here. But the ones that are set further back are often, here's that big alien one I showed you near the beginning, there, the grey alien. That one is kind of set back a bit and is protected by these other rocks, so is in pretty good condition. So this is what I think is happening. I think this whole area was like a bit like the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, and a lot of it's eroded away. There's that one with the weird square on its forehead, just there. You can see the square, just there. This is only a JPEG, so it's lost a bit of detail. But there we are. I mean, yeah, like the Valley of the Kings, a lot of these were probably burials, and there were probably temples along here, that main temple being further back. The rovers drove right past the temple and come along here, and we got rows and rows of carved objects and also skulls of dead animals which were possibly buried with some of these people, perhaps, or just may have died in the area or been washed into the area by the cataclysm, which may have washed water along this area and then deposited lots of skulls and bits of crap everywhere and debris, which is why you see all these things on the ground in rows and things like that. So a lot of this may have been deposited by the actual water as it kind of flooded along here. So that may explain some of the density of objects we're seeing here. But I do think a lot of these ridges were actual buildings, or at least burial mounds of some sort, and they've eroded away, exposing some of the skulls and statues and things that were here buried. So there we are. I'll call it a day now. I'll put some more clips in coming up in a few seconds of any other things I found in this area. But I mean, obviously to me, this was the most outstanding of those finds because it's not only larger, but it's pretty clear and it's intact, almost perfectly intact by the looks of it, which is quite astonishing. And even in the raw image here, if you let your eyes adjust, you can see that eye, you can see the mouth detail, you can see the chin, you can see the other eye sticking out the edge of it there. So I haven't added any detail to this. All these details are in that image. Here's the basic enhancement here. You can see that detail. There's the eye, there's the other one, there's the mouth. It's all there. You just got to be careful when you enlarge it, not to destroy any detail when you brighten it up and stuff like that. And I'm very careful with these images not to degrade them in any way when I'm processing them. So there we are. Thanks for watching, everybody. That was pretty long, but there's a lot to see here. I'll put some clips of these coming up and any new stuff. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you soon.